Well, welcome, my Star Trek fans. Fellow Star Trek fans, I welcome you to another video that involves my favorite subject, Star Trek. Now, recently, we did the build for the U.S.S. Constellation, NCC 1017, and I used the Polar Lights 1000 model kit for the build. Well, this is the conclusion of the build, and this is the finished model. So, I'm going to do a little bit of a review on it, and I'm going to give you some of my thoughts, and let's get right to it. So here's the model. This is the U.S.S. Constellation, NCC 1017. You can see she's all burned out and destroyed from the planet killer. Despite all the damage, the landing party, led by Mr. Scott, was actually able to get her running through impulse engines, and actually gave her phasers. He recharged one fully, he fully charged one phaser bank. And they were able to create a diversion while the planet killer was after the Enterprise. Then under the command of Commodore Decker, he had taken over when he had gone over to the ship. You can see she's badly damaged. And I took all the spots from the actual digital remaster episode of the Doomsday Machine, and I had made a little notes on where the damage was and what the damage was. For instance, the port side nacelle had the damage where there was a hole along the top, and you can see the frame inside, and the Bussard collector was actually blown off and gone. But the starboard side, the Bussard collector was still there, but the outer bubble was a little damaged and cracked, and the back of the nacelle was completely gone. It was completely blown off. There was a little bit of damage on the starboard side nacelle pylon, and the secondary hull, for the most part, didn't have a lot of damage. You can see, we'll pan around. You can see where the shuttle bay is. The damage that I did for the secondary hull, I thought it would look cool. I actually damaged the deflector dish. Let me show you guys. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, if it's going to zoom in. But I thought that would look pretty cool. So we took a little chunk of it out, and we put the scorch marks around it and burned it up. And the bridge is actually for the first pilot episode. That's why it's a little bit higher. But my original plan was to melt it down and destroy it. I decided against that because I didn't want to just really maul it up. So that's why I ended up painting it instead. So when you look at it from the top, it looks pretty cool. But when you look at it from a side view, you can see it's the higher bridge area with B and C decks. So what we ended up starting with was the base. So what I did was I took a piece of scrap wood. Let me get it to focus for you guys. I took a piece of scrap wood and traced out the circle. Then using the scroll saw, I cut it out, and I ended up painting it, making it as best as I can to look like the planet killer coming at you head on. And like we had done for the model build we just completed, we did the U.S.S. Enterprise set in 12500. I had wanted to light the base. With this one, I did the same thing. Let me show you. I put the power pack in through the side, and I hollowed out an area, and I ran the wires from the LED. So you can just use the switch on the power pack, and I let it where you can take it out and reinsert it to change the batteries. And I used the flickering LED light because I thought that was just really cool. You guys remember the inside of the planet killer? It had kind of like a fiery furnace in the middle. And I thought that the flickering LED would look good. Plus, it looks good on the bottom of the ship. So we painted the sides as well as the bottom to make it look like the Planet Killer. Now, I know it's not exactly in scale because the ship probably would be that big if it was in scale with this base. But I ended up doing this to show that the ship is in the foreground, and the Planet Killer is way off in the distance as she's starting to be pulled in before the destruction of the ship. You remember Mr. Scott rigged the impulse engines to blow after 30 seconds. So that's why it's in this scale. I decided to make it small. If I'd have made it really big, I think it would have just been too much. It would have been in a way. What I was thinking, I could have made like the edges raised to show that the inside was a little bit deeper, to show some depth, but it is what it is, and this is the finished base. All in all, I'm pretty happy with it. With the paint job, I think it came out pretty cool. The Planet Killer ultimately stopped by the U.S.S. Constellation as her impulse engines were put on overload. After we did the base, first thing I did was I did the primary hull. And we took the model, the 1/1000 scale model kit from Polar Lights, and I put a base coat on. Well, the first thing I did was I put a bit of primer, a little bit of gray primer, so when I put a really thin coat of the white, it would come through. So we put primer, I put a thin coat of white, and then we put the decals on. And then I marked the areas where the damage was. Again, this is based on the remastered version with the CGI. The AMT, the original version, we'll do another time. I have a model set aside just for that. But this is the CGI version. So I marked off the damaged areas, and then I cut it out with snips. And then I traced it onto the bottom, and I did the same thing. After that was done, we used a hot glue gun, and I put some of the paper clips and the wire coat hangers. The heaviest one, the coat hanger, is the ridge along the bottom, and the paper clips are along the top. And it's held together with the paper clips and hot glue. And what I wanted to make it look like, they had areas of the hull that was scorched was still there, and areas of floors and maybe walls that was still there. So I put a bit of Scotch tape, and what I did was I put some glue on it, the hot glue, and I kind of coated it in hot glue to kind of make it look like part of the hull plating. And when that was done, we ended up painting it black with the paint gun. And I think once we painted it black, it just really came out. It really, really looked cool. Because before the paint gun, it just looked like a model with a bunch of stuff sticking out of it. But once we put the scorch marks, it really came out. You see the bottom of, well, let me do it this way. I'll show you the bottom of the primary hull and all the damage. That's just so cool. And I hated to do this to her because we really damaged her. But for the sake of the episode, I think it's a pretty good depiction. Like I said, the scorch marks really bring it out. So when we finished the primary hull, we moved on to the secondary hull. And there wasn't really a lot of damage. There were no areas that were ripped open. I'll show you the port side. So most of it was just the scorch marks with the brush, paintbrush. And again, I put some of the primer, a very thin coat of the white, and then we put the decals on. Show you the bottom of the decals, all the markings. And like I had said, we took a small chunk out of the deflector dish. I thought that looked pretty cool. And then we scorched it up. That's not true to the episode. It was my idea to do that, but I thought it looked pretty cool, so that's why we did it. See that? And I love the way the light is kind of reflecting off her. And after we did the secondary hull, we did the nacelles. Now the nacelles were fun, like the primary hull, because there was a lot of damage in the nacelles. You can see the port side over here. The Bussard collector was totally blown off and destroyed. And you could see the little shaft in the middle that kind of powers the unit. And along the top, it had a really big gash along the top. And as a result, the registry markings were burned off and scorched. But for the most part, the nacelle is still there and would have been able to be repaired should they have brought it back to a starbase. But you can see the starboard side. The Bussard collector is there. The inside is destroyed and there's some damage on it. There was cracks and there's a hole in it. You can see in the back end of the nacelle has been completely blown off. So I guess if this was taken to a starbase for repair, they would probably, I don't know, what do you guys think? Replace the whole nacelle or repair the ones that are there? And then we did the same thing. We put the primer and we gave it the thin coat of the white, and then we put on the decals. You can see the scorch marks underneath where the registry markings are, coming across the top, along the back, the scorch marks on the back of the nacelle. You can see the damage. But all in all, she really did save the Enterprise, because when the Planet Killer was going after the Enterprise, Mr. Scott got the Constellation moving and gave her fire power, so she was able to fire the phasers and distract the machine from the Enterprise. Well, when we were finished doing the nacelles, we put the primary hull on, and then we used hot glue and we attached it to the base. And what this is the wire coat hanger. I think they're so handy for all kinds of different things. And I hot glued her into place and I angled her down a bit, just like she is in the beginning of the episode. And then when everything was finished, we put on a coat of clear coat. And I know it's not supposed to be gloss, but that's all I have is the gloss clear coat, and I got a lot, so I'm going to just use it up. But we sealed in all the decals, we sealed in all the paint, and we sealed in everything on the surface. So that was the build. And this is the finished model of the Constellation, Commodore Decker's ship. Commodore Matt Decker, commander of the U.S.S. Constellation, NCC 1017.